I'm Richard Frieder. I'm the Community Engagement Director here at the library, and very happy to welcome you here tonight for People's Budget program. The library is delighted to be working once again with Hartford 2000 and the City of Hartford, Metro Hartford Alliance, and Leadership Greater Hartford on this People's Budget program. Now, there's probably nobody in the room who was at the very first People's Budget that we did, although there could be. But Linda and I were talking recently and realized that the first one was in 2003, so it's quite a while ago. We haven't done it every year since then, but many years we have, and I think this might be the third or fourth consecutive year that we've done it. And I think it's because of the partnership that we have with, among the Hartford 2000, the city, the library, Leadership Greater Hartford, and the Alliance, that this is working well. So, as many of you would probably agree, the budget of any municipality is really part of the heart and soul of any organization or any city. It helps tell the story of the city. If you want to know the priorities or the values of any municipality, the budget is a good place to look. Now, People's Budget is a public input process, and public input into the city budgeting process is important for a few reasons. One is that I believe, and I think many of you believe, that it results in a better budget. By having the public have a say in the process, the end product is better. Another is that it results in buy-in. If the public has a chance to participate in producing the budget, chances are they're going to understand it better and support it as things move along. And it also strengthens the democratic process. So all in all, it makes Hartford a better place. So this is really important work, and I'm glad that you're all here to kick it off for this year. I want to note in particular that all of the partners involved really appreciate the way the mayor, the city council, and all of the city staff approach city budget. It's taken seriously. I know that the mayor and city council really appreciate and value the input that is received from the public. And that's part of what makes it all work. You may know, or you can see in your program, and I think this will be mentioned later also, that tonight is part one. Part two happens on Saturday, March 21st. Tonight is basically informational, and on Saturday the 21st it's going to be kind of a hands-on workshop. And it's actually kind of fun. I know that some of you have participated in it before, but those of you who come and join us will have a chance to pretend for a few hours that you're the city council, and you can actually balance the budget. The mayor and other officials will be there at least part of the day to hear your input and see what you come up with in terms of scenarios for balancing the budget. So make sure to join us on March 21st. It'll be here in this building, but in the Center for Contemporary Culture down the hall here. So speaking of down the hall and the library, I can't step away from the microphone without saying that we have so much going on here in the library. I see a lot of familiar faces, but I see some new faces too, and that's great. But whether you've been here hundreds of times or this is your first time, I hope you'll take a few minutes to look around the library and see all of the terrific things we have going on, and come back often. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Jackie McKinney, who is the co-chair of Hartford 2000, and she has a few words to share with you, and then we'll kick it off. So again, thank you so much for coming, and please welcome Jackie.
Welcome. Glad to see you all here today. As he said, my name is Jackie McKinney, and along with Bernadine Silvers, we're co-chair of Hartford 2000, which is basically a coalition of neighborhood NRCs. And we do these kinds of events and program for the good of the community. And so I'd say welcome to part one. I think this year is particularly exciting. As Richard said, we've moved along over the years, but I think this year we've taken a huge leap, and you'll see more of that. We have We're being testers, beta testers, is that what they call it, for software. And it will allow you on Saturday to participate in deciding what we have to do. I won't tell you what the number is, but we are unfortunately going to have to make some cuts or some changes in what we do, and it would allow you to do it. You'll be working in groups, and with this fabulous new software, you won't need a calculator or anything, and you'll be able to influence the budget. So I think this is a real jump for us, a real plus for us in doing the people's budget. The people's budget, our budget. Something near and dear to all of our hearts. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Daryl Hill. He's the COO of the City of Hartford.
Thank you, Jackie, and good evening, everyone. Thank you, Hartford 2000, for the opportunity that you provide the city to engage in this public communication on our budgeting process. As I'm sure you all know, but may not appreciate, the budget is not only very important, it is the most significant policy document for the city and for any government. It details what we're going to do with the dollars that we receive from you all, as well as other sources. It starts with a very intensive administrative effort to develop not only the capital improvements program, but the operating budget to meet the needs and services that we believe are necessary to maintain and care for our city. Through that, and at the end of that process, the mayor makes his decisions on what it is that he will be presenting in his recommended budget. Mr. Sanchez, our Director of Management, Budget and Grants, is going to go through the calendar. I'll steal a little bit of his thunder and say that the mayor will be presenting his recommended budget on April 20th. After the mayor presents the recommended budget, we go through our continued public process with the large public hearing and the council budget hearings. Those will be through May, with the requirement that council adopt a balanced budget by May 31st. Throughout the process, it is very valuable to us to have the public's thoughts and opinions about where we should be focusing our efforts and energy, the services that are most valuable, and particularly given our current budget situation, those services that are maybe not as valuable that we should be considering, or the mayor should be considering, and the council should be considering either reducing or eliminating altogether. Since the Great Recession, or the onset of the Great Recession, that the economists after the fact defined as a rather short period of time back in 2009, but since then, 2010 through the current 2015, we, along with other governments across the country, have cut tens of millions of dollars out of our budget. We've reduced services, we've thinned out our staff, we've laid people off, to be candid. That is not what we want to do, but the financial reality of the day requires us, the mayor and the council, to make those difficult decisions. In recent years, the City of Hartford has been very creative in how we've balanced the budget. Those creative options no longer exist. And I stand before you today with a lot of my fellow city staff in the room to know that the daunting task of balancing our budget, that is just under $49 million, we're going to rise to the challenge, and we will present a balanced budget. But the sheer magnitude of the dollars is going to make it a very, very difficult process. So here on March, what day is it? 12th. In a short 37 days, the mayor will present. And after that, about 40 days later, the council will adopt. So in the next 70 to 80 days, we're going to be going through, as a city, a very rigorous process of determining what our policy document for fiscal 16 will be. Thank you for coming. We want your thoughts, good, bad, and different. We need to hear it all. Everything is being considered. And as Jose or Mr. Sanchez walks through the presentation, you'll get a much better feel for not only the timeline, but where the dollars in our current budget and projected for next year sit and where our abilities are to adjust those monies. Look forward to engaging you all in conversation, answering questions. We do have a wide variety. I think almost every department is represented in the room should you have questions. And we will move on to I believe, the question and answer period a little bit later on. Jose Sanchez, our Director of Management, Budget, and Grants.
Hello and welcome to the People's Budget. Today I will provide you with a preliminary estimate of our current services budget. Current services signifies what the City of Hartford's general fund expenses are projected to be for the next fiscal year based on the current services being provided today and without any effort to mitigate expenses or generate additional revenues. So it's pretty much business as usual budget, which you'll see here today. But this will not be the budget that the mayor recommends to council on April 20th. We will also provide you later on with a quick overview of a web-based application that we are introducing to help the people who are going to be working on the people's budget to balance the budget. Rather than doing it with a calculator and a piece of paper, there's an application that you will be able to reduce expenses here, increase revenues there, and that kind of thing. And you'll get a quick overview of it today, but next, on Saturday the 21st, that's when you will effectively use this to give us your suggestions on how to balance the budget. So I am going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to start this PowerPoint presentation here. All right, this is our calendar of the major events that take place during the budget process. It all began on January 27th, where all the department heads got together at the Public Safety Complex, and we officially kicked off the budget, providing the guidelines to the department heads on how they should submit the budget for consolidation at the city as a whole. The departments were required to submit their budget on February 13th. We are in the process currently of having all the department heads and their staff meet with the mayor and the COO, reviewing what they've submitted as a budget so that it's fully understood by the administration. On the 20th, by charter, the third Monday of the month of April, a recommended budget will be provided to council. And then that will initiate more events with the public, including our public hearing, which usually takes place in Buckley. All citizens, residents are welcome to come to that and speak their mind on the budget. And then we have what are called departmental hearings during the month of April and May, where each department head presents to council their budget, and there's a question and answer to provide council with the understanding of all the details associated with the budget. And then finally, the budget is adopted on May 31st, and that'll be a nice day for me, I'll tell you that. The next one. I'm using one of those roller mouses that, so give me a little time. This is a slide which shows how our revenues are generated at the city. As you can see, there's two major components of our revenue generation. One of them is property taxes, and the other one is what is referred to as intergovernmental revenues. The property taxes are associated with commercial, residential, automobile taxes and things like that, and Later on, if you have any questions on any of the slides that are being shown here, we have our department heads here and experts who will be able to answer detailed questions on whether it's taxes or anything else. Intergovernmental revenue, this is the funds. Thank you. Intergovernmental, these are the funds that we receive from the state of Connecticut, which comprise 45% of our total revenue. As many of you know, this year the state is having difficulty balancing their budget, and as a result, they will be reducing the amount of money that they provide to the city. By the way, 75% of this red slice goes directly to the Board of Education. Just comes in one hand and goes out the other. Likewise, with general property taxes, makes up almost 50% of our other revenues, and a big chunk of these property taxes also go directly to the Board of Education. We do have other revenues, relatively small, sale of property, fees, etc. And we have a slice here called other financing. In this year, as many of you know, we included the sale of one of our parking garages to balance this year's budget, and that number is included in this slice right here. If you take that out, then it's all more urgent to see how our revenues are really based on property taxes and state funding. A breakout of those revenues are listed in this slide. We have the current year budget here, which totals $552 million, and our initial forecast for revenues next year total $528 million. So as you can see by this slide, we are currently anticipating a $24 million reduction in revenues. The key components to that are the governor's budget, which has cut the city's contribution by $5.1 million. Other financing sources, that's where we have the $14.4 million of the sale of the Church Street garage this year. And then there are two accounting changes that are also happening this year. We are moving from anything associated with bond sales premium or grants benefit reimbursement. We've been historically counting those as revenues. We are starting next year, we'll begin counting them as credits to expenses. So the true revenue reduction is more like $17 million after adjusting for the accounting changes. Looking at tax revenues, property tax revenues, one of the things that's unique to Hartford is the fact that we have a lot of non-taxable property. This is our own city-owned property, state-owned property, churches, hospitals, nonprofit organizations, universities. They are tax exempt, and we have a large share of that, more so than any other municipality in the state. We are the capital city, so we don't generate tax revenues from there. This is where we do get our tax revenues. This slide I'd like to show periodically so that the residents of Hartford understand that they are being treated not much differently than other municipalities in the state. Even though we have a higher mill rate than the other municipalities like New Haven and Bridgeport, who have a mill rate of approximately 40 mills versus our 74 mil, for residents, we are the only municipality in the state that has an assessment ratio of less than 70%. And currently, as of this year, the assessment ratio is 29.9%. So what all that means is that the amount of taxes that the average resident pays in the city of Hartford is actually lower than the residents pay in New Haven and Bridgeport, and in West Hartford and East Hartford, which I don't have here. And why is that? Because although we have a high mill rate, we have a low assessment ratio. So for a $125,000 home in Hartford, the resident taxes are $2,777. The same value of a home in New Haven and Bridgeport generate more property taxes, and here's the difference. So a resident in Hartford, New Haven, actually pays more property taxes for the same value of a home. Moving over on the expense side, our expenses are split, as you can see here, by this pie chart. The predominant expenditure that we have is the Board of Education, which comprises over 50% of our expenses. We also have a large benefits and insurance category. Our benefits are approximately 90% of salaries. So for every $1,000 that we pay an employee for payroll, we're also paying $900 in benefits. Those benefits include pension, health, Social Securities, and some other categories of benefits. The other big slice is our public safety group that's composed of the police, the fire, and our EST group, 911, and they comprise 13% of the total expenditures. Another large slice is non-operating, which totals about $36 million, or 6.5%. The non-operating includes things like utilities, the MDC charges, the folks across the street who process our wastewater, tipping fees, the stuff that we have to pay to have our garbage processed. Other slices include debt service. This is the amount that we pay for principal and interest on the bonds that have been issued in the past for infrastructure. Then we have smaller slices here, including appointed and elected officials, administrative, infrastructure. This includes funding that goes to the Hartford Public Library, which we're in right now. You heard Monday the mayor talk about a $48 million budget gap. This highlights that $48 million budget gap. What we're seeing first and foremost is a reduction in revenue of approximately $24 million and an increase in expenses of about $24 million. So it's pretty much a 50-50 driver in terms of what's driving our budget gap. If you look at it closely, though, we are going to show an increase in property tax revenues as the grand list has picked up a little bit. Then we have intergovernmental. Based on the governor's budget, we're actually losing $5.1 million in that category. And then the other category, as I said before, that includes the sale of one of the garages that we're not doing again, and some accounting differences. On the expense side, we've got payroll and overtime growing close to $7 million. That's driven primarily by collective bargaining agreements, union contracts that have wage increases and step increases and COLA increases built into the collective bargaining agreement. The pension, the MRF is the Municipal Employment Retirement Fund. That's a pretty big number. It's $42 million. Not too long ago, it was zero. But because of a variety of events, the city has to contribute that amount. This should be stable for the foreseeable future, and I think there may be some good news there in the future, as recently the treasurer has shown that for last year there was a good return on investment on the pension fund, and that will help smooth out some of the things. On the benefit side, we're going to be growing about $2 million. As wages go up, benefits go up with them. We have quite a bit of funds dedicated to health, and health inflation, although much less than it was 5 years ago, does still exist, and we're seeing that. Leases, contracts, and services, you're seeing the magnitude of that, about 17 million, but there's no increase, or not a significant increase. The biggest driver on the expense side here is debt service. And the $35 million or so that you're seeing in next year is more realistic based on the amount of debt that we have, as opposed to the 20 million that we have in the books this year. Part of it is a couple of years ago, there was some refinancing of our bonds, just like a mortgage where you have a high interest payment and you're paying 6%. If you can go out there and refinance, you can reduce your amount of mortgage. We did the same thing, and that held for a couple of years and helped us balance the budget in prior years. The other categories, utilities, holding pretty stable there. The Board of Education and the library. This current services budget presumes no additional funding or no reduction in funding. By state law, based on something called minimum budget requirements, we have to contribute the same amount or more every year to the Board of Education. Now, since this is a people's budget presentation, and since the ultimate goal is to have you help us balance the budget, there is value in understanding what it is that you can use to balance the budget and what it is that you can't use to balance the budget. Not everything in the financial operations can be adjusted, modified, or mitigated. So we essentially start with an expense budget of $576.8 million, which is what we're looking at the current time. But that, once you include the fact that we have to provide the Hartford Public Schools approximately $289 million, and the library with $8 million, we can only truly affect $279 million. So you can see now we got a $48 million budget gap, but instead of being based on $576 million, we really only have $279 million to work on. But that's not true either, because we have other expenses that are contractual and legal and mandated. Payroll, we have collective bargaining agreements. We have to comply with those collective bargaining agreements. We have a pension obligation that's based on our charter that says you have to contribute what is called the ARC payment. And benefits that are also part of the collective bargaining agreement, whether they're health or whatever. So really, when we start with 576, we can really only affect $98 million. And as they say in those information, we're not done yet. We got debt service. Just like you are obligated to pay your mortgage, we are obligated to pay our debt as well. There's a risk of not paying debt, and that's called bankruptcy. So we really only have $62 million worth of dollars that we can use to mitigate. And if you buy 2 steak knives, we'll give you 2 more, and we keep going. And as you can see, municipal budgets are not easy to work with. We've got utilities. We pay for electricity, for buildings, we have gas for heating. We also have lease agreements and other contractual obligations that are based on legal documents that we cannot get out of. We got property casualty insurance. All the police cars, all the fire trucks, all our buildings, they're insured, and we need to pay those insurance premiums. We have taken advantage of low interest rate, and instead of bonding for 20 years to buy a police car or a fire truck, we've decided to instead use a low interest rate and lease them. So we have leasing, vehicle leases that we have to, are obliged to pay. And then there's the MDC water waste treatment and tipping fees for our garbage that likewise we have to pay to keep the city running, and there's not much that we can do about that except reduce garbage or whatever. So really, the amount that we really have available that we can play with to help balance the budget is really only $21 million. So you ask yourself, if we've got a $48 million budget gap and we only have $21 million that we can work with, how are you going to do it? And that's something we will work with the people to on Saturday to make happen. Now, payroll, even though I've got it here as something that cannot be modified, the collective bargaining agreements can't be modified, but they do have clauses in them that allow for reductions in staff. So the next slide that I'm going to show, and this is in preparation for Saturday's event where we'll be asking you to help us balance the budget, is essentially what is available to the mayor, to council, to the administration, and to you that will allow for saving money on the expense side. Now, what I'm showing you is just on the expense side. We do have revenue opportunities. Not something that many people don't like to hear, but other towns do it all the time. We've done it in the past, and that's to increase the mill rate. It's not something we want to do, but we can help mitigate the budget gap by raising taxes. But we can also mitigate the budget gap by cutting expenses. So these are the kind of things that are available to us for mitigating the budget gap. And for the Saturday exercise, we will be providing more detail on this, as well as the software, which you're going to see in a little bit to help mitigate the budget. Now, there are always, we've done it in the past, and it's not something that we like to do, but there are what we call one-timers that can also help mitigate the budget, and we'll always keep an eye on those as well. So that concludes my presentation. I know you probably have some questions. We're going to save that, the question and answer for the end. We have many department heads here, so that if there's questions that I can't answer, they'll be able to answer. So now I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jeff, who's going to show you a demo of the software that we're going to be using next Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. We're going to be taking a look at a web-based application that is going to... Oh, we're going to be hearing from the mayor.
Let me just introduce Mayor Pedro Segarra. He is fitting this in with a number of other events, and so welcome, Mayor.
How are you? How's it going? Thank you. Hi, Claristine. Claristine and I were co-workers a couple of years ago. We won't say how many, but glad to see that you're here. Thank you all so much for being here. As I indicated in the State of the Union, I praised Hartford 2000 for the work that's involved in the public library in doing these people's budget. This process and what we learn from this process does impact our decision-making in budgets. It has for the last several years, and it will continue to do that because we want to honor the people's will as a component of budget making. The other thing that we're going to be doing starting next year, and we're going to feel it out this year, is having the public actually decide the priority of part of the capital improvement budget expenditures. So that's going to be something new that we're going to look into. It's a challenging budget year. It's a $48 million gap that we have on revenues as compared to expenses. But we have done it before. So we will approach this very seriously, very strategically. We will consider your input, and we will make sure that we will make the best decisions without, as we have done in the last 4 or 5 years, increasing taxes to the point that it becomes disadvantageous to the city. We're also not going to slash services left and right. We haven't done that. We can't do that. We have too many people that depend on our city in order to have that safety net that isn't provided by others. So it's a difficult task, it's a challenging task to be able to reconcile that budget gap. But we also need to be strategic and use the budget as a way that puts us in a better place in the future. And I think that in the last couple of years, despite the fiscal challenges, we've been able to make the investments in the right places that's actually leading to a momentum in our city that is yielding some fruits and some results. So you see more development, you see more businesses that are coming in, you see more excitement, more vibrancy that is coming to our city. And we want to also continue to prioritize our educational system because we depend on an educated student to be able to come back and service our city and be productive for the city. So I don't want to go on too much, but I do want to thank you all. After I leave here, I have 3 more meetings to go to. One of them is that we're celebrating that Hartford has been selected by the Aspen Foundation, and we're going to be getting, I think, a lot of money. I don't know how much it is, but a lot of money to continue to work with our disconnected youth so that we can take those youth, 16 to 24, that are currently not being productive, not in school, not at work, not being trained, and get them back into the economy by providing some good alternatives. So thank you very much, and I'll continue to stay tuned, keep my ears open to make sure that we integrate the work product. Thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening again. We're going to be taking a look tonight at a web-based tool that is going to allow you to put in your priorities for your city government. And as you put in those priorities, you're going to be able to see the financial impact that those priority has and ultimately be able to work to balance a budget. The tool that we're going to use, what we have up here is Balancing Act. And as I mentioned, it's a web-based tool that's going to allow you to work to balance the city's budget. And this is how it works. It has the elements that we see in any budget. You will have your revenues. That's going to be the funding that's coming into the organization. And you have expenses as well. What's being paid for services, for police services, and things like that. This is a demonstration, so this will be Hartford data. What we have here is not actually Hartford data. And there's also graphics where you can see expenditures by a certain percent. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to move to another slide, and we're going to look in these revenues right here, and we're going to look at a revenue in a little bit more detail. Okay. If you notice, there was a small change down here for fees and fines. So what we did, we went into where money is coming into the organization through fees and fines, and we're seeing a little bit more detail. With this button, we can press it and we can increase revenue from this source. And with this button, we can decrease revenue from this particular source. You can add a comment when you go in here and say, hey, I'd like something, revenues coming in from this source or from these fees and fines to be increased. You'll see your original budget and you'll be able to see the change, okay? Now we're going to look at an example over on the spending side. Okay. In this particular example, we've gone into Parks and Recreation. We see all our spending opportunities here. We have police, parks, fire, and we're going into the detail of Parks and Recreation. And it's a total budget of $6.4 million in this example. And we see $3.2 million for parks and $3.2 million for recreation, okay? The parks revenue has been increased by $290,000. In this example, whoever was entering this had the priority. They wanted more resources for parks. They're saying, put more financial resources here. That's saying your priority. But what we did is we're now in deficit because our expenses are now greater than our revenues. So that gives us choices, and those are sometimes the challenging choices that have been discussed here this evening. But the choices to reduce this deficit is to go into another area of expense and bring it down, or to go into an area of revenue and bring it up. And this is the tool that anyone that comes out and joins us on March 21st, right up here in the library, is going to be using. And this tool, when we have Hartford data in here, not this example, is going to have the deficit that was discussed tonight of 48 million. And you're going to have the opportunity to work in groups to be able to talk and to work on closing it. After that date, on the 21st, this is going to be available for individuals that want to go in, put their input and priorities, and provide that feedback to the city. It's a good tool, and it's an excellent tool to be able to get your input on city services. So, thank you for your patience. And at this point, Linda, we're going to have the department heads going to. Sure. Thank you.
So we ask you, if you're interested in coming on Saturday, the 21st, to sign up on a sheet in the back, just in case, God forbid, we had a blizzard or some such thing and we needed to let you know that we postponed it or something. You probably read in the paper that the St. Patrick's Day Parade has been moved from the 14th to the 21st. So the workshop begins because we're expecting freezing rain.
Why is the parade they will move into the
Because we're expecting bad weather, and so nobody wants to march or watch when it's freezing rain, I think. So in any event, the parade marches down Main Street. So the workshop starts at 9:30, so you should be okay getting here, but probably best to come from the east if you possibly can. You can park on the street, you can park on the library's parking deck, and the city has an employee parking lot all the way down Sheldon Street on the left. You could park there if you wish to do so. We might take a small break in the middle to watch a few of the bands. I don't know how we feel about that. In any event, I do want to also remind you, if you didn't already put your dots on the boards outside when you came in, anybody who lives in the city is whether you're an employee or not, welcome to put your dots up there, and we will provide that information to the folks who come on Saturday, so they'll have a sense of what people who attended today thought were the most important things, and things that, if we had to, we could eliminate, programs and services. Also, we wanted to mention that the PowerPoint presentation, we do have copies at the door, and you can pick one up on your way out. But now we do want to, we're very fortunate in having many department heads and senior staff here to answer questions that you might have, both about the budget and about the components of the budget. So maybe we could just go around and introduce yourselves, your name and if you're not wearing a uniform, you'll have to tell us what department, but want to start, where can we start? Where do you like to start, Daryl?
Maybe it would be easier, since no one is jumping up to introduce themselves, if I take the opportunity to introduce the department heads, or the next senior person from the departments that are represented. I will start with, I'm Daryl Hill, Chief Operating Officer. Jose Sanchez, Management and Budget. You've heard from us. Young man, Chief Ravella from the Hartford Fire Department, Police Department, Hartford's finest. Deputy Chief Martin from Hartford's Fire Department, Hartford's bravest. Henry Alexander, Acting Corporation Counsel. Leanne Rawls, Acting Finance Director. Dan Luce, License and Inspections. Cara Dodd, Planning. She's at the back, my right, your left. Clayton Northgraves, Emergency Services and Telecommunications. Most don't know what that is, but that's 911. Sabina Siderau, Metro Hartford Information Systems. She's sitting in the back row. Ron Jarrett, Constituent Services and Policy. Dr. Pino, Health and Human Services. Henry Burgos at the back left, Human Resources. Who am I forgetting? John Phillip, our tax assessor. Coming from the left rear, Mark Nelson, the tax collector, everyone's friend.
Hi, everybody.
Am I forgetting, missing anyone?
Hello.
Troy Stewart from Children, Families, Youth and Recreation. Apologize, Troy. And I think that is, if I missed you, stand up. Wonderful. Linda, I think that's all of our department heads or senior staff that are here, division heads. What's next? Does anyone have any questions? No, thank you. Good night.
And if you could come up to the microphone, it's easier for virtual to video if they come up here, tape.
I have several questions actually pertaining to Mr. Sanchez's presentation. Why is the MRF so high? And if you would go over the definition of MRF again, I'd appreciate it.
MRF is an acronym for Municipal Employee Retirement Fund. It's the pension fund that is for all City of Hartford employees except the 1716 union, which is the pension is funded through the state. Why is it so high? It's because the city charter requires that the pension fund be fully funded, 100%, meaning that assets have to equal liabilities. Our liabilities, this is the amount of money that we would have to pay if everybody retired at the same time and lived to a ripe old age, is about $1.3 billion. Our assets currently are about $1 billion, so we're approximately 80% funded, and we need to continue contribution to the pension fund to get us to the 100% funding. And the number is, the $40 million is based on actuarial analysis that said this is the amount of money we have to pay.
I don't mean to hog the microphone, but I have several questions, so if you don't mind. There was a significant increase in debt service, and you mentioned the refinancings of older deals, and that worked for a couple of years, and now all of a sudden we're seeing a fairly significant increase in debt service. Would you explain that?
Well, we've got, I'll pass it over to the finance director.
Actually, I'll take a quick stab at it while Leanne, yes, so the increase from the current fiscal year to next year's amount is, as Mr. Sanchez indicated, a result of a previous refunding or restructuring. So while it appears now to be an increase, what is really happening is the past couple of years were at that same level. But because of the prior refunding, we were able to reduce the 14 and 15 debt service numbers, but we weren't able at the time to reduce the 16 number. So had we not done the refunding a few years ago, the 14 and 15 debt service would have been in that same range. But by virtue of the refunding, we're able to capture the savings, some call it cost avoidance, in the prior and current fiscal year, but next year it goes back to where the previous level was. Next year is not the absolute high. There is a slight step up in 17, a very small trough in 18, and then the absolute highs in fiscal year 19.
Okay, so the refunding was, you were able to reduce debt service for a couple of years, but now we're back to the higher numbers that we did not enjoy earlier.
That's correct, and we, on an annual basis, we evaluate all of our existing obligations for refunding candidates, and if we have the opportunity to refund for savings, we will endeavor to effect that.
And Mr. Sanchez, again, you mentioned one alternative that obviously nobody wants to see, and that's an increase in the mill rate. What would the difference between increasing the mill rate or raising the assessment ratio be, if any?
We cannot increase the assessment ratio on our own. There is state legislature that controls the increase in the assessment ratio for residential properties. We have the assessor here. Do you want to add anything to that, John?
I think that $5.5 million increase, correct me if I'm wrong, Jose, in the, for property taxes to next year is already predicated upon an increase in, a statutorily mandated increase in the assessment ratio for both residential property and apartment property. So that's already in the cake for next year's budget.
Okay, but other cities like New Haven and Bridgeport had a assessment ratio of 70, whereas ours is 29 point something. So why wouldn't we be able to raise ours while the other cities?
It's controlled by state statute. So without a change in the statute, it's on autopilot for residential property, and each year I am tasked by statute with addressing the ratio, and there are 5 possibilities. It can not change. It can go up 1.5%, 2.5%, 3.5%, or 5%. And those 5 tiers are, it's the relationship between the change and what the city raises in taxes each year as compared to CPI, and how those numbers play out is where we land on those 5 tiers. This year, the budget we're in now, there was a 2.5% increase in residential property from 29.2% to 29.93, as Jose said. For next year, it's risen to 30.68, another 2.5% increase based on what happened with this year's budget compared to last year's.
Okay, so the revenues reflect that increase in the ratio?
Part of the increase is associated with the increase. Part of the increase is associated with that assessment ratio increase, and part of it is from the grand list. Now, there is a little bit of history here.
Yeah.
There was an effort in the past to make housing more affordable in Hartford, and so the legislature was written up to do that, and the tool that was used was to reduce the assessment ratio. Now, there is a formula, as John says, that will gradually bring us to that 70%, but that'll take time, take years.
Years and years and years.
But as that residential assessment ratio increases, the assessment ratio on other properties decreases simultaneously? No?
It's statewide, everything's 70%. So here, everything is 70% except for residential real estate and temporarily apartments. They'll be at 70% next year, where they will stay. And apartments are now defined as 4 living units or more. The residential, as I said, it's in 2.5% increments. It's going to take 30, 40 years to get to 70%.
I have one last question. You mentioned that the Board of Education contribution is virtually untouchable. Okay, I mean, why is that? Just minimize it.
there is a state legislature that says if municipalities' CMT scores are below 50% of the state average, so that means that approximately half of the municipalities in the state of Connecticut have what's called a minimum budget requirement. And that minimum budget requirement essentially says that you can never cut funding to the Board of Education. So once it's been established at a certain level, in our case, $284 million, you can never cut back on that. No, even if you have less students, or even if the Board of Education is become more efficient and doesn't need the money, we still need to provide them the $284 million.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Carlos Bonet. Well, I probably need more information and some education on this topic. But I just learned that more than 50% of the properties in Hartford, they don't pay taxes. So probably people who own a property in Hartford, we have to pay taxes for them. So I would like to know what is the criteria to select those people, those properties that don't pay taxes. I understand there are some buildings, churches, but I live in Hartford for around 12 years, and I see that there are some areas that there are a lot of institutions, non-profit organizations, or churches. I don't know what's the criteria to select those. They don't pay taxes, and who defends that?
John, if you want to say anything about that, but while he's coming up here, I know that the mayor and the administration has made conscientious efforts going to the state, asking the state to play a bigger role in what is called pilot payment in lieu of taxes. It's an acronym called pilot payment in lieu of taxes, so that the state could say, okay, we own property, we own the Capitol building, we own the legislative building. So they give us a certain percentage of the property tax that we would normally collect, but it's a small amount, so.
So the entire exempt property grand list totals roughly $3.6 billion. Of that, the city of Hartford is the #1 owner with a little over $1 billion. Behind the city is the state of Connecticut at about $850 million in assessed value of all their property. And then the rest of it, it's almost all of the rest of it is the colleges and the hospitals. Hartford with 3 big hospitals, 2 colleges that own significant real estate. Then, you know, the churches and the nonprofits, it's true they don't pay taxes, but they combined are less than 10% of the entire exempt grand list. So really, and the feds have a fair bit of property too, the courthouse and then the federal building down on, where is that? Is that Church High Street? Thank you.
And it's a common scenario in other towns and other cities, because I believe that this is really weird. I used to hear that.
Most, you know, this is something that's been true since the 70s, and it was true in Boston in the 70s, and I think it was true in Providence in the 70s. All the capital cities deal with, you know, they're the seat of state government, and so there's significant state holdings, and then they tend to have, you know, if another municipality has a hospital in Connecticut, there's just one, right?
It's the nature of being a capital city. You're
Right.
going to get a high percentage of tax exempt property. We have gone to hospitals, we have gone and asked them to contribute, because we've got 2 major hospitals that don't pay taxes, but those requests have fallen on deaf ears.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, my name is Nick Wolf. Pleasure to be here tonight in the beautiful Hartford area. I just do want to say that what's discussed here is highly important, because all ships in this area rise and fall with Hartford. very important. I guess my question is going to be about the ballpark. It's not about the name. I want to call them the praying mantises because, I like the name a little bit. But, its names weren't so hot, but, you had to pick one, so. I'll go with the praying mantises, and I guess my question is going to be, in this particular analysis, where are the expenses related to the ballpark? Because my understanding is that there's not going to be any revenue, at least till 2016. And then where exactly is the revenue in 2016 going to show up? And, what's the story about how that might balance out?
Sure, thank you. In 2016, there are no revenues from the stadium. The stadium is under construction. It is being built with a target completion date of March 11th, 2016. The first pitch is scheduled for April 7th, 2016. So at that point, we will begin deriving revenues. The revenues derived from the stadium, the parking around it, and the development around it, which will happen at a later date, will be used to support the Hartford Stadium Authority's debt service. So those revenues will not show up in our general fund budget, as they will be captured and used to pay the lease payments from the city to the Hartford Stadium Authority. Any other questions? Yes.
My name is Antoinette S. McQuarrie. I want to know how much money you're going to will spend of the library and schools. That's my dad.
Currently, the plan is to spend $8.2 million on the library. The same amount that we're spending this year, we're anticipating to contribute next year. So that's $8.2 million. The Board of Education, the number there is $284 million. The same number that we've had for the last couple of years.
And I want to know how long we build the bus stops, between Albany and Woodland.
Are we talking about the New Britain to Hartford?
Yes.
Anybody familiar with that?
The bus stop.
Connecticut Fast Track, when does it go into service? From New Britain to Hartford? Or? They're owned by the city.
I want to know that we build the bus center.
Hi, Tom Deller, Director of Development Services. Connecticut Transit is responsible for the bus shelters. We've been working with them, trying to understand when they can be installed. Bus stops on Albany Avenue will be consolidated and new shelters will be put up when we do the Albany Avenue streetscape improvements, which are supposed to start next summer. So there'll be shelters coming along towards the end of next summer and into the year after.
How long they're going to take how long they're for the next summer?
The problem is with all the road construction and moving the curbs and sidewalks, it doesn't make sense to put the shelters up and then take them down and then put them back again. So new shelters are part of the road project, which is supposed to start in April of 16.
And what about the library, the Albany Library?
That's an area that's supposed to get shelters, but they are not slated to start until April of 16.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions? Anyone?
So I want to thank everyone for coming, and definitely want to thank all the people from city government, all my colleagues. Maybe a round of applause for everybody who came out. And I'm sure if you have a specific question, they'll hang about for a minute or two. Please fill out the feedback form and leave it in the basket before you leave. And everybody can fill this out because we would like to know how to make programs better and how to address your issues. And again, if you are coming on the 21st of March, would appreciate it if you signed up outside or outside this room and pick up one of the PowerPoint copies for your reading pleasure. Thank you very much.